She was the voice of Ducky in The Land Before Time. She was Anne-Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven. To millions, Judith Barsi was a bright, talented child star. But behind the camera, her life was marked by fear, control, and escalating abuse. And in July 1988, that fear became a reality. Judith Barsi was born on June 6, 1978 in Los Angeles, California, the only child of Hungarian immigrants Maria and Joseph Barsi. Both of her parents had left Hungary in search of stability and opportunity. Joseph fled after the failed 1956 uprising, while Maria emigrated later, determined to build a better life. They settled in the San Fernando Valley, where Maria worked as a waitress and Joseph as a plumber. From the beginning, Maria was deeply invested in her daughter's future, and when Judith's natural charisma began to shine through, she encouraged her to pursue acting. Judith's entry into the entertainment industry came almost by chance. At the age of 5, she was spotted while skating at a neighborhood ice rink. A talent scout noticed her petite frame and expressive face, and soon she was auditioning for commercials. Her very first was for Donald Duck orange juice, and it quickly snowballed into a steady stream of work. By the mid-1980s, Judith had appeared in more than 70 national commercials, becoming a familiar face to American audiences. Casting directors and agents consistently remarked on her professionalism. According to her agent, Ruth Hanson, Judith's small stature, she was only 3 feet 8 inches tall at age 10, allowed her to convincingly play characters several years younger than her actual age. Hanson told the Los Angeles Times that Judith was still playing 7- and 8-year-olds, even as she approached her teen years, which made her especially vulnerable in Hollywood, where producers often preferred older children who could work longer hours but still look young on screen. Her television career flourished. She landed guest roles on some of the most popular shows of the era, including Cheers, Growing Pains, Punky Brewster, and Cagney and Lacey. She also appeared in the miniseries Fatal Vision, playing Kimberly McDonald, one of the murdered children in the Jeffrey McDonald case. These roles showcased her ability to handle both lighthearted and emotionally heavy material, a rare skill for such a young performer. By 1987, Judith had broken into feature films. She played Thea Brody, the daughter of Chief Brody, in Jaws: The Revenge, but it was her voice work that cemented her legacy. In 1988, she voiced Ducky in The Land Before Time, a character remembered for her warmth and optimism. The following year, audiences heard her as Anne-Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven, a role that required her to balance innocence with emotional depth. Both films were released after her death, and both became enduring classics of 1980s animation. By the age of 10, Judith was earning an estimated $100,000 annually, which can now be converted to about $400,000 annually. This was enough to support her family and purchase a 3-bedroom home in the Canoga Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. On paper, she was living the dream, a child star with a growing resume, financial security, and a reputation as one of Hollywood's most promising young talents. But what was it like for Judith beyond the screen? Accounts from those who knew her paint a picture of a child who was not only talented, but also deeply kind, playful, and imaginative. Friends and colleagues described her as bubbly and affectionate, with a natural ability to connect with people. She loved animals and had a pet cat named Kitty, who was often by her side. According to retrospective profiles, she adored spaghetti, enjoyed playing dress-up, and dreamed of one day playing a princess in a movie. Her personality shone through in her work. Directors noted that she had an unusual ability to take direction quickly, delivering lines with both precision and emotional authenticity. Voice directors for The Land Before Time recalled how she infused Ducky with a sense of joy that was entirely her own. That warmth was not an act. It reflected the way Judith approached the world. Even in professional settings, she was known for her politeness, her eagerness to please, and her ability to make adults laugh at her quick wit. On the surface, Judith Barsi's life looked like a Hollywood success story. By the age of 10, she was earning 6 figures annually, starring in commercials, TV shows, and feature films. She was beloved by casting directors for her professionalism and adored by audiences for her warmth and talent. But behind those closed doors of her family's modest home in Canoga Park, Judith lived in a climate of fear. Her father, Judith Barsi, was an alcoholic, was controlling, and a violent man whose abuse escalated over years until it culminated in murder. Judith Barsi had emigrated from Hungary after the 1957 uprising, eventually settling in Los Angeles, where he worked as a plumber. Friends and neighbors later described him as a man with a volatile temper and a drinking problem. According to the Los Angeles Times, he was known to boast openly about his violent fantasies, telling acquaintances that he wanted to kill his wife and daughter. One friend, Peter Kivlin, recalled hearing Joseph say he wanted to kill Maria, quote, at least 500 times. And then when he was challenged about what would happen to Judith, Joseph would chillingly reply, quote, I gotta kill her too. This was not idle talk. Joseph's abuse was both verbal and physical. He berated Maria, calling her names and undermining her in front of others. He was controlling of Judith's career and earnings, using her success as a way to assert dominance over the household. His drinking only intensified his aggression. Neighbors later told reporters that Maria often confided in them about the threat she endured, but she also expressed fear that leaving him would provoke even greater violence. For Judith, the abuse was not abstract. It was a lived experience. She confided in relatives and friends that she was afraid to go home. According to Distractify, she told extended family members, quote, I'm afraid to go home. My daddy is miserable. My daddy is drunk every day, and I know he wants to kill my mother. These words, spoken by a child barely 10 years old, reveal the constant state of fear in which she lived in. During the filming of Jaws: The Revenge in 1987, Maria's brother recalled that Joseph threatened Judith before she even left for the Bahamas to shoot the movie. He allegedly held a knife to her throat and warned her not to disobey him. The fact that Judith was traveling for work enraged him, and he made it clear that her growing independence was intolerable. The abuse manifested in Judith's behavior and health. Her agent, Ruth Hansen, told the Los Angeles Times that Judith had once been, quote, a happy, bubbly little girl. But by 1987, her demeanor had changed. She began exhibiting signs of severe stress, pulling at her eyelashes and her cat's whiskers, and compulsively biting her nails. She also experienced sudden weight gain, which her therapist attributed to the psychological toll of living in constant fear. Judith was placed in therapy where her fear of her father was documented. According to reports, she broke down during an audition for an animated feature, sobbing uncontrollably. Hansen later said, quote, that's when I realized how bad Judith was. These breakdowns were not isolated incidents, but part of a pattern of escalating distress. Maria was not blind to the danger. She confided in friends and neighbors about the abuse and even took steps towards leaving. In December 1986, she reported Joseph's threats to the police, but when no physical evidence of abuse was found, she chose not to press charges. She later rented an apartment in Panorama City as a potential escape plan, but she hesitated to move in. Friends suggested that financial dependence and fear of retaliation kept her tied to the marriage. Judith's earnings had provided the family with their home, and Maria may have felt trapped between protecting her daughter and maintaining stability. Leaving an abusive relationship isn't simple. It's not just a matter of walking out the door. Survivors often face a tangled web of fear, financial dependence, emotional manipulation, and systematic barriers that make escape feel impossible. Maria Barsi knew her husband was dangerous, and domestic violence survivors are often trapped by more than just physical danger. There's psychological control, isolation, and the constant threat of retaliation. Joseph Barsi had threatened to kill Maria and Judith hundreds of times. He controlled the household finances, which were largely dependent on Judith's acting income. He monitored Maria's movements and made it clear that any attempt to leave would be met with violence. Maria was doing what many survivors do, trying to survive within the limits of what felt possible. She was gathering resources, making plans, and weighing unimaginable risks. She was doing all of this while trying to protect her daughter. It's important to say this clearly. Maria Barsi was not to blame for what happened. The responsibility lies entirely with Joseph, the abuser. Maria was a victim of prolonged, escalating domestic violence. Her hesitation to leave wasn't weakness. It was fear, shaped by years of threats and a system that didn't intervene when it should have. By 1988, the situation had reached a breaking point. Joseph's drinking worsened, and his threats became more explicit. He told friends he was going to kill Maria and Judith, and he began stockpiling gasoline in the garage, a detail that would later prove significant. Maria continued to confide in neighbours, telling them she was afraid for her life. Judith, meanwhile, grew increasingly withdrawn, her once bright personality dimmed by the constant terror at home. The abuse was not only psychological, but also controlling in practical ways. Joseph monitored Maria's movements, restricted her independence, and used Judith's career as leverage. He resented Maria's role in managing Judith's acting and accused her of trying to take control of the money. His paranoia and possessiveness created an environment where both mother and daughter felt trapped. What makes Judith's story especially tragic is how many warning signs were visible to those around her. Neighbours heard the fights, friends heard the threats. Judith herself voiced her fear to relatives. Her therapist documented her trauma, yet intervention never came. And on July 25, 1988, Joseph carried out the threats he had made for years. According to the Los Angeles County Coroner's report and fire investigation records, he waited until Judith was asleep in her bedroom. He retrieved a .32 caliber pistol and shot her once in the head, and she died instantly. Maria, who was reportedly in the hallway at the time, was shot next. Joseph then poured gasoline on both their bodies and throughout parts of the house. He left them there for 2 days. During that time, neighbours noticed an eerie silence. The family's cat, Kitty, was heard meowing from inside the house, but no one saw Judith or Maria. The smell of gasoline began to permeate the air. On Wednesday, July 27th, Joseph set the house on fire. He then went into the garage where he shot himself in the head. Firefighters responded to the blaze and quickly discovered the bodies. Judith was found in her bed, Maria in the hallway. Both had been shot before the fire was set. Joseph's body was found in the garage, with the pistol nearby. The fire had caused extensive damage, but the coroner was able to determine that the gunshots had occurred prior to the blaze. The Los Angeles Times reported the case as a murder-suicide, noting the neighbours had long been aware of the family's turmoil. One neighbour recalled Joseph saying, quote, "I'm going to kill them and myself," and another said Maria had expressed fear that her husband would follow through on his threats. The family's cat, Kitty, was also found dead in the home. Judith had been deeply attached to the cat, and its death added another layer of heartbreak to the scene. News of the murders spread quickly. Judith Barsi was not just another child victim, she was a recognizable face and voice in American entertainment. Her roles had endeared her to millions. The fact that she had been murdered by her own father after years of documented abuse and missed opportunities for intervention shocked the public and the industry alike. All Dogs Go to Heaven, released in 1989, was dedicated to Judith's memory. Don Bluth, the film's director, said that Judith had been, quote, "absolutely astonishing" in her work and that her death was, quote, "a terrible loss." Her voice as Ducky in The Land Before Time became a bittersweet reminder of her innocence and talent. The murders also sparked conversations about domestic violence and systematic failure. Maria had reported Joseph's threats to the police in 1986, but no charges were filed. Judith's therapist had documented her fear, and her agent had noticed her emotional decline. Neighbours had heard the threats, yet no one came. No intervention came. But at the end of it all, Judith Barsi was more than a child star. She was a child whose life was cruelly snatched away from her. She brought joy to millions through her work, and her voice, whether as Ducky in The Land Before Time or Anne-Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven, carried warmth, innocence, and a spark that made her unforgettable. Judith lived in fear. Her home, meant to be a place of safety, became a site of escalating abuse. Her father's threats were not hidden. They were spoken aloud, documented, and repeated. Her mother tried to leave, and Judith herself voiced her terror, and yet no one intervened in time. Judith and Maria Barsi are heartbreakingly not alone. Every year, countless lives are lost to domestic violence. Women, children, and families whose stories never make headlines. Their names may not be known, but their suffering is real. What happened to Judith and Maria is part of a much larger crisis, one that continues in silence, behind closed doors. Telling their story is not just about remembrance, it's about speaking for those who couldn't, and pushing for a world where safety isn't a privilege, but it's a right. Judith's story also forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, that children can be silenced even when they speak, that victims can be trapped by fear and dependence, and that systems meant to protect them can fall short. But Judith's legacy is not one of tragedy, it is also one of remembrance. Her performance lives on, her voice still echoing in homes around the world, and her story continues to be told, not to sensationalize but to honor, to remind us that behind every statistic is a person, a child, and a life. So please, if you or someone you know is living in fear, please know that help is out there. You are not alone. Judith's story is also a call to listen, to act, and to protect. Because every child and every woman deserves to feel safe. Every voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening.